Hi everybody, this is Miss Faina. Today we're going to be talking about parallel and perpendicular lines. So we're going to start off by talking about parallel lines. So let's write it out. Okay, remember parallel lines, they never intersect. Okay, the symbol that we use so we don't have to write parallel every single time is just two parallel lines, like that. Okay. So a little about parallel lines. They have the same slope and they have different y-intercepts, because if they have the same y-intercept, then it's going to be the same line and it's not parallel. Okay. So let's look at an example. If I had the line y equals 2x plus 1, and I have the line y equals 3 plus 2x, let's look at the slopes. Okay, so remember the slope, when in slope-intercept form, is the number in front of the x. So on this first line, my slope is 2. If I look at the second one, again, my slope is the number in front of the x, which is also 2. So if I were to graph these two lines, they would be parallel. They would never intersect. And just by looking at the equation, we're seeing that they have the same slope. Tells us that. Okay, and also notice they have different y-intercepts. Okay, talking about horizontal lines. Remember horizontal lines, that's where we deal with the Hoy-Vux. Okay, horizontal lines are zero slope. They go from left to right, and it's a equation that looks like y equals just a number, and it has no x in the equation. No x in the equation. So horizontal lines, if we just have a bunch of horizontal lines, those are going to be parallel. Okay, so an example of what two lines that are parallel, that are horizontal, would look like would be y equals -2 and y equals 8. Okay, if we decided to identify the slope, which is n, we would know that if it's a horizontal line, the slope is 0. Same goes for this one. It has no x in the equation, so our slope is 0. Because we have the same slope, these lines are parallel. Okay, vertical lines. Those are the lines that go up and down. If I have a bunch of vertical lines, those are also going to be parallel. Okay, this is where we talk about the Vux part of Hoy-Vux. Remember, vertical lines, undefined slope, and x equals a number, and there's no y in the equation. So an example of two lines that are vertical would be x equals 3 and x equals -4. Okay, to identify the slope, again, because it's just x equals a number and there's no y, the slope is undefined. For both of them. And because our slope is undefined for both of them, that means they're the same, which makes them parallel. Okay. Looking at the next side. This is where we're going to talk about perpendicular lines. Okay, the symbol we use to represent perpendicular is what looks like an upside down T. Okay, perpendicular lines intersect at one given point, and where they intersect makes a 90-degree angle. Okay, So about their slopes and their equations, what this looks like. Their slopes are going to have opposite signs, which means one will always be positive and the other will always be negative. And the slope is going to be the reciprocal of the slope. And all that means is we flip it. So if I had the number 1/3, its reciprocal would be 3/1, or just 3. Okay, so let's look at an example of two lines. So we have y equals 2x plus 1, which has a slope of 2. Okay, if I wanted to create a line that was perpendicular, I would need to take this slope. Currently the slope is over 1, and I would need to flip it. Okay, I would need to flip it so it becomes 1/2. That's the reciprocal part. And make it the opposite sign. So it was positive, I make it negative. And that would be the slope of something that is perpendicular. So an equation that would be perpendicular would be a -1/2 x plus 3. Okay. Now, if we're talking about vertical and horizontal lines, well, one of the lines, vertical, goes up and down. Remember, that's an x equals equation. And the horizontal lines go left and right, and that's a y equals equation. Well, when we have that, these intersect at one point that happen to make a 90-degree angle, which means horizontal and vertical lines are perpendicular. Okay, so an example of what their slopes look like and how you know that it's horizontal and vertical. Okay, if I have a horizontal line of y equals 4 and a vertical line of x equals 1, well, the slope of a horizontal line from Hoy-Vux is m equals 0, and the slope of a vertical line, Hoy-Vux again, is undefined. So we have to know that 0 and undefined are opposite reciprocals. Okay, to think of it as a fraction, remember when we have 0 over some number. Okay, and if we try to flip that, we have a number over 0, and we can't divide by 0, and that's why it's undefined. That's just a little bit of extra stuff. Okay, so let's look. Let's do some more examples of perpendicular. Remember, that's the perpendicular sign. Okay, if I have 2/3, what would be perpendicular to 2/3? Okay, well, we make it the opposite sign. So this was positive. We make it negative, and we just flip that fraction. So instead of 2/3, it becomes 3/2. And those two slopes are perpendicular. Okay. What if I had the number -5? What would be perpendicular to -5? Well, we need the opposite sign, so it's negative, so we want it to be positive. And right now, because it's a whole number, we have to understand that it's over 1, and we just flip it, and it becomes a positive 1/5. And -5 and 1/5 are perpendicular. Okay, so let's look at some examples that we have. Identifying parallel and perpendicular lines. Given the slope m equals -2, identify the following. The slope of a parallel line. Well, remember, parallel lines have the exact same slope, so my slope would be -2. The slope of a perpendicular line. That is where we have to flip it and make it the opposite sign. So it's already negative, so I want it to be positive, okay? And right now it's 2, and remember 2 is over 1. And so when I flip that, it becomes 1/2, and it's positive, so I get a 1/2. half. Okay, the slope of a line neither parallel or perpendicular. Neither. That means it's not either one of those. So basically, we can use any number for our slope except -2 and 1/2. Okay, so any number for the slope except -2 and 1/2. Because -2 would make it parallel and 1/2 would make it perpendicular, and we don't want it to be either one of those. So any number, I'm just going to pick the number 4. Done. Okay, that's really all there is to this. So, let's look at example number 2. Given the slope m equals 3/4, identify the following: the slope of a parallel line. Take a second to see if you can figure that one out. Okay, so you should have remembered parallel means same slope. So it should just be the same exact thing, 3/4. Okay, the slope of a perpendicular line. Take a second to think. Okay, remember perpendicular means opposite and flipped. Okay, the opposite sign makes it negative. We flip it, it becomes 4/3. Okay, now we want something that is neither. Take a guess. Okay, neither is any number except 3/4 and -4/3. So a random number, 14. If you picked any other number besides 3/4 and a -4/3, it's correct. Okay, it's literally anything. It could be a 0. It could be undefined. Okay, we're just trying to think outside the box, something different. Okay, and next it says, what is the slope of a line? So now we're given an equation and we want to know something that is parallel. Well, what is the slope of this line? The slope is always in front of x if it's in y equals mx plus b form, and it looks like it is. So that means my slope is 3. And again, parallel means it has to be the same, so it's going to be 3. Okay, we want something perpendicular to the line, y equals 11 minus 5x. Okay, this is still in y equals mx plus b form, but they put the y-intercept first and the slope and x second. Okay, perpendicular means opposite and flipped, so we take -5. We want it the opposite sign, which is +5, and we flip it. Right now it's over 1, so it becomes 1/5. Okay, something that is perpendicular to the line x equals 8. Well, remember, this is a vertical line. Okay, and we learned earlier that vertical lines are only perpendicular with horizontal lines. So I just need a horizontal line, which means it has to be a y equals a number or whatever the slope is. So first off, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. The slope of a vertical line is undefined. And the only thing that's opposite than undefined is 0, which would be the slope of a horizontal line. So that's you having to piece things together that you've been taught. Okay, next one. Parallel to the line y equals a -x plus 5. Again, this is in the form of y equals mx plus b. I want the number in front of x. Well, if I look at it, doesn't look to be like a number in front of x, but it is a -1, which makes, if we want it parallel, it has to be the same, so it also has to be -1. Okay, the number in front of x was -1, same slope when it's parallel. Okay, and lastly, perpendicular to the line 3x minus 2y equals 4. Well, what we have to do here is we need to solve for y. So we're going to draw a line through the equal sign. We're going to subtract over 3x from both sides. Okay, when I do that, those zero out. we are just left with a negative 2y is equal to 4 minus 3x. And then I have to divide everything by negative 2. When I do that, the negative 2's make a 1. Y. Okay, we have 4 divided by negative 2, which is negative 2. I have a negative 3x divided by a negative 2. Well, 2 negatives make a positive, 3/2 x. Now I have it in slope-intercept form. The only difference is it put my y-intercept first. So my slope is 3/2. But I want something that is perpendicular, which means I need to make that the opposite sign, so it's going to be negative. And I need to flip the fraction, so it's going to be 2/3. Okay, so this is just helping us identify parallel and perpendiculars and figuring out what the slopes would be so we can start writing equations soon. If you have any questions, please ask your teachers. We're here to help you in any way we can. Other than that, have a great day, Rangers.